What's up, guys? So, my American friends and family, happy Thanksgiving. I'm here in Sydney, Australia. It's already Friday. It's Friday evening. Thanksgiving was yesterday. But as you could read in the title, I want to use this live as a space to address a complicated issue. And if you read the title, The Main Reason Why Boxing is So Corrupt, Part One, it's not Bud's fault. Obviously, if boxing only had one reason on why it was corrupt, then I think I wouldn't do this video. There are countless reasons. It was kind of like, tongue in cheek with that comment. So, firstly, all you boxing fans out there, if you follow my page, a big part of my content is, I'm a boxing head. Now, it's the Bud Crawford, Errol Spence Jr. fight that isn't going to take place. And I see a lot of in the boxing chat rooms, the forums, go to Reddit. People, the common fan loves to talk shit about one side or the other. And I'm not going to use this video to address that. I'm going to use this video to educate on why boxing is corrupt. And we'll start with the belt systems. Now, I was down at Bondi Boxing Club in Sydney today, a fight gym where I manage a boxer down there. And she is a WBC Intercontinental Female Champion. And I ask a couple fighters down there, granted they're in the first 5 fights, I asked them, how many different belts are there? What makes a lineal boxing champion? And this one question asked to pro fighters about their sport, and for them not to know this, it's not that they're unaware, it's just a sign of the times that boxing is a bit confusing, and I'll go over it with you. Firstly, we'll address the belt system and what a lineal champion is. Sticking to Australia, George Kambosos was a lineal champion until Devin Haney came down the first time and beat him. We all know that Haney beat George twice. But the second time, George wasn't a champion, and Haney gave him his rematch. What lineal means is that before Devin beat George the first time, George had all 5 belts, 4 major belts, and the 5th belt is the ring. Those 4, I have them in my notes because sometimes I get confused. The WBA, WBC, the IBF, and the WBO are the 4 major ones. And then you have the ring. The ring is run by the American sports writers, the boxing sports writers, and then they give that belt out. That's been going on since 1922. All the other belts, in order to be a lineal champion, you have to have all of those combined. And to give you an example of the weight classes, now, and I'll make this make sense with Bud and Errol Spence. And the link I put, you guys could click on this link. It's from DAZN. If you guys are boxing heads like myself, it's just basically a list of the champions. In Bud Crawford and Errol Spence Jr.'s weight class, the welterweight division, the 5 belts are taken up by 2 people. The ring is vacant. Bud Crawford has the WBO, and Errol has the WBA, WBC, and IBF. Now, this is all fucking confusing in itself. If this wasn't confusing in itself, it's not like, MMA is the sport, UFC is the organization. In the UFC, there's 1 middleweight champion. There's 1 light heavyweight champion. There's 1 bantamweight champion. In boxing, that's not the case. And this adds to the corruption. And I'll get to that in a second. We have to cover, it's like a pyramid of understanding for you guys to know why it's corrupt. And we're going to start with the belt system. Okay. So we have the 5 belts. When George was the lineal champion, that means that Kambosos had the WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO, and ring. Haney came down to Australia, beat George, took all those belts. Until somebody beats Haney or Haney vacates the belt by changing weight classes, gets confusing even more, he will be the lineal champ until he beats somebody. How did George get all the belts? Do you remember? Tefaloma Lopez beat Vasily Lomachenko and took all of his belts. This is all fine and dandy unless a fighter leaves the division or vacates. Thus, it gets confusing, but that's not the corruption. Okay, moving forward. I think we're all up to date here. You had an agreement a couple months ago between Bud and Errol to fight. These 2 are the greatest of our generation at welterweight. Crawford is, in my opinion, we haven't seen a fighter with knockout power at both sides of the plate, meaning that in boxing, it's such high stakes. The room for error is so little. You'll rarely ever see a fighter go both ways in a fight, meaning orthodox to southpaw, switch in a fight, in an exchange. Crawford not only does that, but he also has the power on both sides to knock you out. That makes him special. Now, Errol Spence, little more sort of conservative, a little more classic guard, tighter, He's not as flashy as Bud, but he's as technical as it gets. He's bigger than Bud, a bit younger than him as well. And it's just a fight that the fans want to see. Now, back to the corruption. We have the belts. There's 5 of them. Once you go from who has the belts, you then have to start looking at who are the promoters. Each boxer is a manager. So Errol Spence's manager is Al Heyman. Okay, Al Heyman is famous for managing Floyd Mayweather Jr. He's won multiple manager of the year. He's from Cleveland, Ohio. You'll rarely ever see him do media, but Heyman is a sort of Mount Rushmore of boxing managers of our era. Okay, so Spence is managed by Heyman. Now, Heyman gets to make all the negotiations on who Errol fights. Now, in the UFC, I'm using them as an example because it's one organization, unlike boxing, which has all of these, we'll call them organizations due to the belts, it causes a bunch of chaos. So unlike Israel Adesanya, who was the 185 champ, just lost his belt to Pereira, Adesanya doesn't have the option to negotiate with his manager, a guy named Tim Simpson, on who he fights next. Dana does that. Why? Because Dana is the end-all and be-all in the UFC. Boxing does not have that, and without going too in-depth, that alone creates a lot of corruption. You see why. Not the best fighters don't always fight the best fighters because of this, because it's a money thing. If Al Heyman has a guy like Errol Spence and he feels that Bud is a bad matchup, and boxing's kind of like, it's not like you could have a guy who's 18-3 in MMA and still get title shots. Boxing, for some reason, I don't agree with this, they cherish and they kind of romanticize the undefeated record a bit, which I don't agree. Hopefully one day that changes. But because of that, some fighters and some not fighters, boxing managers will avoid certain fights. It's called handling a career. Floyd Mayweather's camp is probably the best example I could think of on handling a career. It's why he waited a bit longer to fight Manny, and it's why he fought Canelo when he did fight him. That's a just gross example of a boxing manager handling the career. Okay, so from the boxing managers, you have boxing promoters. Think the English fighters. Think Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn is a boxing promoter. The promotion he promotes for is called Matchroom Boxing. Now, if we're not confused enough, you have, Top Rank, Matchroom. You have PBC, which ironically, Al Heyman started professional boxing, and that started in 2015. Because of all of this, it creates a stew of, I want to fight this guy. I don't want to fight this guy. Let's dodge this guy. Let's go this route. Rather than a specific system or a structure. There is no roadmap. You can't get into boxing and you say you're a middleweight, say you're 160. You can't just come into boxing 10-0 and see a path. Not a clear path. You have to align with the right man. You have to hope that you're aligned with the right team first off. Then from that, you have to hopefully you're aligned with the right management. And then from there, you got to hope that they have your career's best interest in mind. And that's not always the case. We've seen a lot of mishandling of careers. I mean, the list is long. Fighters that Bula Andrade is a guy that comes to mind that I could think of right off the bat. I haven't seen him fight in years. I mean, I think he's having a fight coming up. This guy should be active. But because camps can't agree, managers can't agree on money, everybody wants a piece of the pie, this then causes fights to never take place. And here lies in my point. Don't blame it on Bud because the Spence fight didn't take place. Heyman was offered $25 million. Errol was offered $25 million to take that fight flat, and Heyman declined. Why? Who knows? They're going to go their separate ways. I mean, Errol, I think in his late 20s now. Crawford's 35. Maybe that fight never takes place. But my point is, and we'll go into these more in detail, reasons why, because it's a long list on the corruption of boxing. I just wanted to start here. To understand the corruption, you first have to understand the belt systems. What is a lineal champion? And from there, you have to then understand how the structure works of when you're a pro, and what that pecking order is to fight under a big promotion. You have to be at a gym. You have to have a boxing manager who has connections. From there, the boxing manager has to have connections with the promotions. You have to have connections with the media, and then the negotiations take place. And you can only imagine how many hands are in the pot, how many people are taking money out of these fighters' pockets. And that is, in my opinion, the biggest travesty of them all. Leave a comment below. Thanks for tuning in. Happy Thanksgiving. Just 4 days in doing these lives. I'm having fun with it. If you watch my content, you can actually see the difference in video quality. That's the camera I use versus the live, my Apple, my iMac. So all you content creators out there, definitely take note in the value of maybe investing in some gear. But I digress. Happy Thanksgiving.